You're going to intervene.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Richard Morco, and this is the Long Hill Report. This afternoon we have Bob Briere, Historian Laureate of Sturbridge, unofficial, and Sylvia Buck, who went on an amazing historical adventure that landed them in the Pacific Ocean and in the middle of a volcano. They started out in Boston in Rte20 and ended up in Oregon in Rte20. Rte20 is the longest road in the country, and they made the trek, and please tell us about it.
This all came about when a gentleman by the name of Brian Farr came to Sturbridge. He wanted some information on U.S. Rte20 because he's going to write a book. And so I told him some things that we had in Sturbridge about Rte20. And then we talked a little bit more together. Then we asked Brian if he'd come to Sturbridge and talk a little bit about this trip he was going to take. And he talked about the highlights he had already started on Rte20. And it was quite fascinating. You know, people, when summer comes, they're going to go on vacation. They go to the beach every year. They go to Disney World maybe every other year. Or they go on a cruise every year. And they miss the beauty of this country. And I think once we decided we were going to follow Brian on his trip to Oregon, this is a way to go. You can see so much. Some places it's certainly different than what we see here with the forest when there are no forests. But yet in their own way, they're beautiful. So we'd like to have you join us in our journey. Not Brian's trip, we'll use maybe some of his pictures, but others that Sylvia took on the trip. So, are we ready to go to Oregon?
Let's take us to Oregon.
I'd like to show you a photo from Brian's book. This is the beginning of Rte20. As he called it, historic U.S. Rte20. It starts in Kenmore Square in Boston, and I think everybody recognizes the Kenmore sign. From there, we will jump a little bit. And Sylvia said, but people know about New England. They've seen most of New England. So we're going to start ours off something you've seen on television, the Field of Dreams. We're going to start in Iowa. And it was by happenstance that we got that far and said, oh, the Field of Dreams is here. Why not go and see it while we're able to? Which we did.
Field of Dreams was a movie, in case you've forgotten. And the theme was, if you build it, they will come. And this is the Field of Dreams.
I think you all recognize this.
In Iowa.
On a cornfield, a man had a dream that the ball players of the past came and they wanted to use a ball field. I assume he may have made the ball field for his children. But then as the movie goes on, you find what went into creating a field, and all the old-time ball players that we remember came and played on the Field of Dreams.
Can I ask you, Bob?
Yes.
Sylvia, when you were there, did you see any of the old-time players actually yourselves?
No.
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Okay, Sylvia. Really? Which one? Tell me.
Oh, I forgot his name, but he was there, clearly. But the corn was only this high, so he had to scrunch down.
Okay, if you remember in the movie, they came out of the corn.
Yes.
But the corn was not as high.
Not high enough. They
Not
had
as
to
high
kind
as
of
an elephant's
scrunch
high,
down.
as the song would have it.
Yeah. But another Iowa
There
place.
were young fellows out there playing baseball on the field. Anyone can use it, no charge, but they don't want organized teams out on the field. I guess they probably figure they'll tear it up with their exuberance.
A question when you were in Iowa. I've heard that Iowa is flat. And that if you had a soapbox, you could see most of the state. If you stood on the soapbox, it's so flat, you could see most of the state. Is that true? Is it that flat?
I never looked at it that way, but it is flat.
All right, fine.
You'd have to be able to stand taller than the corn, because there's corn for miles in
Okay,
Iowa.
well, right, well, maybe a little platform, a little above the corn. And
Yes.
What made this trip interesting is we were used to Route 20, and starting particularly in Boston,
Yeah.
with all the traffic. We were in Nebraska, and I said to her, "Oh, a traffic jam up ahead." And she looked and said, "Where?" Because you're looking probably 6 miles, straight road, nobody there, and there were 3 cars coming at the same time. That's how crowded it was.
you were
It-
brave.
It's
You
a
see
different
it-
Route 20.
You were
might
brave,
say.
though.
You see a car, one in maybe a mile. One of the interesting places we crossed was the Lewis and Clark Expedition Trail. Now, almost everybody that's familiar with U.S. history knows about Lewis and Clark exploring the country for President Thomas Jefferson. And they traveled by boat, canoe, walking, and they did it the hard way. What made it interesting for us when we were out there is we were looking for information about Thomas Proctor Howard. According to the men that went on that expedition, he was born in Brimfield, and we have tried for a number of years to find out where was Thomas Proctor Howard born, and we have not found any record of his birth. But he did die in St. Louis after the expedition was over. So that's an interesting thing to cross the actual road that Thomas Proctor Howard must have walked on.
Yeah. Well, that was Main Street in Brimfield. It still is, I would guess. But 20, is that not going through Main Street on Brimfield, in Brimfield?
We don't know where he lived exactly in
But I
Brimfield,
mean, he would have had to have crossed.
He
it.
would have, yeah, I'm sure.
but he was with the Lewis and Clark group.
Ashfall, and Sylvia can talk about Ashfall. I once went on an archaeological dig when we were in Sturbridge, England, for about an hour and watched people on their hands and knees digging, sifting through dirt to find any artifacts. Ashfall was different. It was a huge, as big as an airplane hangar. And would you like to?
The building covered a dig of many people working over this large area that had occurred. The animals that they found buried in the ash fall had occurred many, many eons ago when a volcano from many miles away had spewed its ash, covering this whole territory. Now, it wasn't the ash that smothered the animals, but the ash fall, which was all ground glass. As the animals would feed on the grass, they would inhale the glass particles, and it affected their lungs, and eventually they died. They congregated at a watering hole here and there and the other place. So this ashfall fossil dig is by one of those waterfalls, and shows some of the skeletons still in place as they're digging.
Did they build the building afterwards?
Yes, yeah, well,
Afterwards
yes.
To cover the dig?
Yes, and to make a display for us to see how it's done and all.
And there are all kinds of fossils in there, animal fossils, birds. And these people were working diligently to try to uncover these and yet not disturb them.
So that's basically the museum itself is that building.
Yes.
For
it's-
that purpose, yes.
And the dig is probably more important than the people coming to see it.
Yeah. Next big point.
Yes. We skipped over a lot of things that we could have talked about. Out in Fredonia, New York, is an opera house. I understand that many town halls used to have a big meeting room in their second floor that they called the Opera House. And in Fredonia, they had renovated their town hall opera house so that it was just a beautiful place to see. And it carries productions, both live impersonators, up-to-date movies, imported operas on film, and so on. Another place we spent a few minutes looking at was Oberlin, Ohio College, where Lucy Stone attended as one of the early women to attend. It was one of the first colleges to admit women and black students. And this is the Methodist Church where she might have spoken from the pulpit.
do
We're
know
not sure. She did speak a lot.
We recently observed in West Brookfield.
Yes, that's why I'm
It's
mentioning
intended,
Lucy
yeah.
Stone, yes.
Of course, she was a Route 9 girl, not a Route 20 girl.
Well,
Yeah.
she's in the neighborhood. And we also stopped at Debate Square, where Lincoln and who? Douglas had their great debate.
Do you know they spoke for hours at a time?
Well, some of us can do that.
Well, actually, that was before TV, and the attention span was a lot longer.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
They were used to it in church.
Yeah.
yes.
Sermons were a lot longer. An interesting place that we knew about only through Brian's book and looking at it. Didn't have any idea where it was. We were traveling down the road and there's a sign, Hell's Half Acre. And you'd think it's a mini Grand Canyon. It's probably a mile in length, but the beautiful colors, and it's deep.
And what state is that?
This is in Nebraska.
In Nebraska. You don't think of Nebraska as having that type of...
No, it's just level ground, and then there's this great big chasm, which takes up, I don't know, several acres. The natives used to use that by getting the animals corralled and forcing them to run into the chasm to catch them.
as a way of slaughtering
Yes,
them?
as a way of slaughtering them. You can't go down into it, but it is certainly beautiful.
That is quite a natural...
We crossed the Continental Divide.
This is a sort of a double picture. In Wyoming, we crossed the Continental Divide. In itself, now we're in the mountains. We're not in the flatlands anymore. And in fact, we stopped into a restaurant and got sandwiches to go and sat near the top of the Continental Divide where we had lunch. But it's just one of those experiences. How often is anybody from Massachusetts or Brimfield or Sturbridge going to get a chance to cross the Continental Divide? Most of the adults today have learned about the divide through history books, but the younger people probably have no idea what you're talking about.
Probably not.
Well, it's one thing to see it, pictures or movies. It's another thing to drive it. You really get an idea of what the country is all about, how vast it is driving. My family and I used to do this annually with our kids as they grew up and up and up and up. And when they were in high school, they mentioned to me one time, you know, our classmates don't have any idea how big this country is. And driving it, you do. You didn't speak about Cody, Wyoming.
You know, we've all heard about rodeos, or most of us have heard about rodeos, but you never see one. I remember as a kid having my cousins take me to the Providence Arena to see Roy Rogers when he was in his heyday, and you know, live stunts and horses and steers and roping going on. We were in Cody, gone through a museum, and we saw a sign, rodeo, tonight. So I said, you want to go to rodeo? She says, I've never been to a rodeo. I've never seen anything like that, even on television. I says, we'll go to the rodeo. And it was quite an experience to be there and actually see them doing roping and tying up the feet of the steer and all against the clock.
And bull riding, or horse riding.
Yep.
And you've spoken how clean it was in there.
Yes, I thought it'd be kind of